Good morning, everybody out there in YouTube land. It's your T-shirted historian with Mr. Grimm.
Hello.
Okay, what is that written under your thing?
Runatir, Skald, and Board.
Mm-hmm.
Runatir means god of runes. A Skald is a Norse poet / bard. And a board is a gentleman or lady who runs a whoring establishment.
That's a lot of hats to wear, my man.
Yep.
Did you fix that up for your show? Well, no, I guess you can't. You don't do it on Tuesday nights anymore. You do it on Saturdays now. Speaking of which, how did your last Saturday go?
It went well, I think. I can't see the audience numbers anymore because it doesn't display them publicly. But we definitely had more tips. A new player seems to fit in. I took the opportunity to sort of reset my style of GMing a little bit. So yeah, seems good.
Oh, good. When you guys actually get back to Cyberpunk, I'm definitely going to be watching again. I have a vested interest in that one.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't seem that popular with people other than you and us. So bit tricky.
I don't know. As a genre, it seems like Cyberpunk is still pretty popular these days. I don't know. A lot of science fiction movies and stuff, though, I notice are coming out that are about robots and AI. So maybe that's kind of coming full circle, and we're back on that topic again.
Science fiction is always about the present, not really the future. So it makes sense.
Kinda, yeah. Okay, so I picked a hard as hell topic to discuss today. I was hoping to get some help from our gilded friends and our audience members, but we seem to only have one person watching us. So
people will watch it on the replay.
Yeah, they'll watch us on the replay, but the live audience participation and interaction is way more fun on these things. I probably should have pushed this a little bit harder, but
I will be right back. One moment. Something at the door. Be right back.
Oh, okay. All right. So our topic this morning is immersive and reactionary gaming. And for some reason, it didn't get the whole title in there. Hang on a minute. There we go. Isn't that great? Technology right there at your fingertips. There we go. Now the total title is Dungeons and Discussions, Immersive and Reactionary Gaming, which it is. And hello, Esoteric Order of Nerdy. No, you're not late. So anyway, what is immersive and reactionary gaming? Well, obviously, immersion is what you want to be when you are playing the game, because it's getting involved in the characters, getting immersed, becoming part of the story and that you're telling, and being part of the action and being there. It's not just like sitting back at the table, eating a bag of Takis, and just kind of like, lazily, throwing in commands and stuff like you might like a computer game or something. Hey, Driving in Dragons. And as far as reactionary goes, what I mean when I say reactionary is I mean a game that can adjust quickly to player expectations, player inputs, and what players wish to do from any given moment. And something that handles all that action really, really well. Maybe can handle, a decent-sized group of people, not just like, a solo game. Because obviously, a solo game is the perfect example of the best kind of immersionary and reactionary game. Because you've only got one player to work with, and they get all the attention. So anything they want to do, the GM can react to instantly and play through.
Solo gaming as in one-on-one, not solo as in solo.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, it's in one-on-one, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I should define better. But yeah, finding a system that handles immersive and reactionary gaming is difficult, because you kind of tend to fall into a couple of traps with your games, and one of them is games that are extremely simulationist. And I'm not knocking on Alexander McCree's. I'm not, because I love the dude and I love his games. But his games have a level of simulationism that is so minute and so detailed that you could consider it to be really strongly immersive because of the minutia. But as a system, is it reactionary enough to be able to handle fast-paced changes and player inputs? You know?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different factors at work here, I think. The simulationist approach does have one thing going for it, which is that it tends to operate in the same way the real world does to a large degree. And we know how things work in the real world. So if a player tries to do something, you can generally make a plausible call on the odds of doing it, or how difficult it is, or whether it's even possible at all. So that's helpful. Simple mechanics are often easy to react to what players do for in the same way, but simple mechanics are often more narrative, and so make sense in a story sense, but not in a kind of game physics sense necessarily, which can throw the players off trying to figure out their chances of doing something, and throw the GM off because they can't gauge how difficult something is with the mechanics.
Yeah, and then that is kind of like an almost a double-edged sword. It's like the easier a system is to use, as in the more rules light a system is, it becomes easier for a GM to navigate it and to run it. But at the same time, it also becomes kind of difficult, because when the inevitable player questions start coming up, and you know, I've got some decent examples of stuff like this, but you know, stuff that's happened at my table. We were playing Darwin's World one day, and I had to inform all the players. I said, okay, so when you buy fuel, it doesn't come in a set amount. It comes in what's called tanks. So of course the first question that pops up to a player is, well, how much is in a tank? And I'm like, well, I don't know, because every vehicle is different, so their tank size is different. So, you know,
I guess you can rationalize it a bit in that smaller, lighter vehicles have smaller tanks but can get further on them, and big vehicles are bigger and heavier and take more fuel to go the same distance, I suppose.
Exactly. I mean, you know, Driving in Dragons would be the first person you'd want to ask about this stuff. Because yeah, it's like a motorcycle engine probably doesn't burn as much fuel as, like, say, you know, like a long haul rig. You know.
Yeah.
Plus, they burn different kinds of fuel too, because, you know, one burns diesel and the other one doesn't.
Yeah, and the heavily detailed systems. I mean, yeah, like he says, it takes a lot of time to do anything. You know,
yeah.
They say that role playing is 20 minutes of fun packed into 4 hours, or whatever. Then it's combat.
Yeah, and like he says, if you simulate the myriad of variables that you're sacrificing, simulating the chaotic, rushed, and exciting feel. Yeah, you're taking 20 minutes to resolve what realistically happens in 2 seconds. Yeah, exactly. Hey, Keely Chow, it's good to see you, man. Oh, it's a Loki raid. Hey, all right. We should be getting joined by Ironcaster this morning, but I know he's coming off of Loki's channel, so he's probably taking a break before he comes on, if he's planning on coming on. But yeah, and that is one of the things. It's like, you can get super duper crunchy, realistic, down to the bleeding edge minutia in combat systems, like Phoenix Command. Oh man.
Millennium's End.
Yeah. Well, even like some forms of like Twilight 2000 were pretty involved.
The old
Chris Persia.
Aliens RPG.
Uh-huh. The old Aliens RPG, yes. Hey, good morning, guys. It's good to see you. Punk Waddle, yay! Look at all these people rating us. Oh my god, we got 21 people. And Ironcaster is on his way, okay. So yeah, it's kind of a balancing act. It's like if you have too many rules in play that govern how something plays out, it tends to break down the reactionary part of your gaming. Yeah, you can maybe maintain more immersiveness because, it's a little bit easier for people to get immersed and understand what's going on with their character when you can break down all of the little tiny details of combat. It's like, okay, the bullet pierces your left thigh. According to the dice rolls, it pierced your left thigh. And then according to the dice roll, it tore through, 5 of your sinews or whatever, and causes bleeding. So you're bleeding every round. So now you're having to make a check for this and a check for that every round. And, it just starts piling stuff upon stuff upon stuff. And at some point it starts to become so mechanized. It's like, you might as well just be playing a computer game because a computer can handle this stuff a whole lot faster than any people can.
Yeah. And it retains its immersive quality in the computer game because it handles all the math and bullshit for you. I think some high fidelity systems, though, can still be immersive and be quite quick. I find percentile systems, it's usually quite easy to intuitively grasp how difficult something is, or what your chances to succeed on something are, because it's just boldly a percentage. So you have an idea with that. So that can be quick in a lot of ways and retain high fidelity because you've got a 1 to 100 range. So all those little differences can pile on and work.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan Frost says, tell us more graphic bloody details at 9 a.m., please. Well, I do actually have the old Warhammer charts that were written up by, I guess it was like a medical professional, where, some of those critical hits were, they were fun. Yeah, if you really want me to, I could drag out some of those and we could start,
The bullet barrels towards your crotch. The good news is it completely missed your balls. The bad news is it tears a furrow through your taint, and your guts fall down around your feet.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. You were very lucky. Your the artery in your leg was fortunately missed. However, the arrow managed to impact one of your testicles, and that's what blocked the shot. I mean, I don't know. It's like how realistically gross do you want to get with it? And Kip Marlowe says immersion can be achieved using crunchy systems, though they're not your thing. Yeah. But flexibility is much more closely aligned to rules light systems, if only because of the assumptions behind narrative play. And keep in mind, I kind of had a miniature discussion with Kip Marlowe about this just a couple of days ago. Because as it turns out, we're both 3.0 and Pathfinder First Edition veterans. And oh my god. I have a love-hate relationship with 3.0 and Pathfinder First Edition. Because on the one hand, you have so many rules that govern every aspect of play down to the, ridiculous levels. I mean, but on the other hand, taking a turn in combat takes forever. Because it becomes a case of like, okay, can I take a 5-foot step and still get my actions off? Because I have multiple attacks. So I want to get multiple attacks, so I can only take a 5-foot step in one direction. Okay. Or is it a case of, okay, I have a feat that lets me, travel a certain distance and then still get all my attacks off. However, in doing so, am I going to cross any of the enemy's threat ranges that causes an AOO to proc? You know? And it's just... I don't know, man. It's like Pathfinder and all that stuff. It just seems like it comports itself a whole lot better to being more tabletop than, RPG. And we have a caster.
Hello.
Hello.
Failed to say something cool before getting hit. Roll for cannon fodder damage. Yeah, exactly. He's a Pathfinder victim still in recovery.
So
yeah. Oh, sorry, go.
Oh, I was just going to ask, when we're talking about like a larger group, like the question is, how big?
Well, that's the thing. Everybody has a different opinion on what a decent sized group is, or what a good group or an optimum group is. I have found that 5 players is usually optimal, just because what happens is you have one person who can cover every, important base. You got your tanky person, you got your DPS / sneaky person, you got your magey person, and then you got your clericy healy person. And then your 5th guy usually runs either a support class or a jack of all trades or something that can sub in for one of the other classes. So 5 tends to be optimal for me. And of course, I'm still thinking tactically, because again, here I am, saying, yeah, you got to have all your basics covered. But that's true, though. You tend to want all your basics covered when you have a party. It's very difficult to make it very far in any kind of game without having, all your areas of specialty covered. Because if you decide, we're going to go into a dungeon, and you didn't bring a sneaky along who can, find all your traps and decipher all this crap and figure out all the traps, your guys are going to be blundering into all kinds of junk.
That's when I adjust the game to fit what the players want to play.
And you could do that.
Yeah. What you're saying about tactical play, though, and Pathfinder and that being more suited to miniatures, nothing kills my immersion faster than a battle map.
I can understand that, and there are a lot of people who are like that. We didn't use miniatures at my table because, well, frankly, my GM doesn't like them. That kills his immersion. And he's one of those GMs who is so immersive that he won't even let you play music at the table. I mean it. I mean, it's like, anytime I've wanted to have some music in the background, it's like, no, it interferes with my gaming. Okay.
I ban music with lyrics. That's as far as I go.
And that's fair. I can understand that. Because, you end up singing along with the music.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Just that if the problem is, again, with that party size, if you go too big, you have to then sort of have a good game that has... that can limit the amount of options you have available. That way you can sort of streamline things, because you get too big and with too many people having too many options, and you might as well go to the store and wait for your turn.
There is that. There's that. And then there's also the case of the player who is kind of forgotten. The player who maybe isn't comfortable speaking up a lot in a bigger group, and isn't necessarily really sure about their stuff, but they don't want to speak up and interrupt everybody else's flow. And that poor guy just kind of sits at the back, and and the GM might try to get them involved, but it kind of becomes what we call bump on a log player.
Some people like to be the wallflower, which I find weird, but some people just like to sit back and be told what to do. So they're the type of people who just want to be there.
Maybe. Kit says he's not sure it's the maps and minis and such as they're all tied to systems that mechanically require accurate measurement of distances and tactical choices. Those rules kill immersion. Yeah. And what I am seeing a lot of now is like Shadow Dark has a real simplified range system. It's kind of like near, far, or whatever, you know? People don't worry so much about, are you within 5 feet? Are you within 10 feet? Can you reach this area and everything? It's like, nah, my spell can go far. Or my spell's only near. And, you know, then you just define how far it can actually go. And
Sesame Street ranges.
Well, I mean...
Near. Far.
Yeah. Near.
Near. Far.
Yeah. Yeah. You do think dropping the war games aspect was a mistake? There was things in place for large groups, and they made them harder to do. Okay. Now the bros, and I'm not shitting on the bros. The bros have always said that, you know, they can run massive size groups, you know, like 10 plus players, 15 plus players, etc. with the way that they do it with the old school AD&D rules. And I could see how that's possible. I could actually see it being more possible with like BX than AD&D, to be quite honest, because BX is just that much simpler.
Yeah, it's a more procedural form of play. It's like the Japanese RPGs and their set way of doing things, you know, and bringing in the other roles at the table, like the mapper and caller and all of that. So it enables faster, easier play with larger groups, but I don't think it helps immersion.
Mm-hmm.
I swing sword.
Yeah.
Okay, Alien RPG uses distance as well. Everything is in zones, so you can act within one. Yeah. See, there's a lot of that, too. There's a lot of zones and stuff like that. I think, doesn't Dragonbane use something similar to that, too?
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I know that, for example, Fantasy Flight Games' Star Wars edition had a range bands, like, you know, short, medium, far, long.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and yeah, those are kind of boilerplate. Robert says there are 7 battlefield operating systems. If you build a team of 5 capabilities, then it can run into a team of 5 using a variant of those 7 systems. Goldilocks zone of variability. Yeah, well, that's why I always thought like 5 was like a nice number for players. I would go with 6, but anything past that is kind of like it gets a little unmanageable. But that's just my opinion.
Unless you have the players essentially running like 2/3 of the game themselves with their in-character interactions and so on. But that happens more with LARPs than tabletop.
Yeah. So I guess it's a weird balancing act, because it seems like what works well for reactionary gaming is a more simplified system that a GM can answer questions quickly for. Because I mean, you know, speaking as a GM, nothing grinds my gears faster than, you know, and I get it. Players are going to ask questions during the game, but if somebody says like, well, you know, what's the stats on this, or what's the stats on this, and I'm just kind of like, okay, well, hang on a minute, I got to look it up, because it does. I mean, I'm not shitting on anybody in particular, and I'm not poking at anybody in particular, because these are the kind of questions that do come up in games. You know, people want to know, well, what's the stats on this, because I need this information so I can have it on my character sheet. But asking the GM to do it is just kind of like, okay, well, I have to stop and, you know, basically put the brakes on for everybody, and that just completely grinds the reactionary portion of the game down to a halt. And thereby it also kind of destroys the immersion portion of it also.
That is one thing that unified mechanics have made better and easier. You don't necessarily have to reference so much. It's in AD&D and that you had different systems for looking for traps or whatever else than you did for combat, than you did for something else. But once you got the unified sort of D20 rules, everything's on the same sort of scale. Though I was just reading an article the other day. Apparently, what happens at most tables is that GMs just go, difficulty 15, roll. And it's that tends to be where everything clusters. You just don't know what to do. Throw a difficulty 15 roll at them.
I mean, there is a nice simplicity to it, because at that point you only have, a 1 in 4 of success?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's usually pretty easy. Like, I don't even tell people what the difficulty is a lot of times, because it's just like, I just tell people, okay, make a skill check. And I don't necessarily have a number in my head for what the skill difficulty should be. I just kind of like have just a basic idea. And it's like, I listen to whatever the player is rolling. And it's like, okay, well, if you rolled an 8 and it's, I'm using
2d12?
No.
Or 2d6?
No. If I'm using Kevin Crawford systems, drink. I know what the skill system is like. So, like, if somebody tells me, I rolled a 6, I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's a decent roll, because the average skill is 1 to 5.
That does throw me every time that it's not on the same scale.
Yeah.
For combat, I always have to pause. And is it 2d8 in this version, or is it 2d6 in this version? It causes that slight pause every time.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why he's coming out with Ashes Without Number and all these other Without Number games, because all of his older format stuff, like Spears of the Dawn and Other Dust and all that stuff like that, is more or less being phased out in favor of the Without Number stuff. Which, of course, we're going to follow suit on that, too, because if I'd have had Ashes Without Number when we ran Darwin's World the first time, I would have never touched Other Dust.
Yeah. And
as it happens, I've already got players asking, can we run Darwin's World again when you get Ashes? And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. Because I'll want to then. Kit says, mechanics don't influence the size of groups, it's the play style. If you want to play with lots of loose social interactions, 8 players is a nightmare. Not so much you're just dungeoneering. Yeah, it's true.
I think that... Sorry, go.
No, go ahead. I was just going to make a little joke.
I think it all comes down to the same sort of problem. Even if you have a foundational, very simple system, the more exceptions and interactions you stack up, the more complicated and difficult to navigate it becomes. And more players is another way of introducing more conflicting factors. Let's say, okay, so you have 3 attacks, but they've cast haste. Which of you should go first? If I cast haste on someone who's got 3 attacks, do they get an extra attack? Does it really make them fun? And then what if you are on haste, but you run into the field with a slow spell? Do they just negate each other, or is one more powerful than the other? What level is? It just, these aren't necessarily great examples, but they show how all these additional interactions and exceptions and everything stack up on what can otherwise be a simple thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked a lot about mechanics for like 30 minutes and stuff, and what constitutes, reactionary and immersive. But what actual systems work best for this? I'm going to say right off the bat, 3.0, 3.5 Pathfinder are terrible for immersive and reactionary, just because the rules crunch, although it's exceptional, and it covers every possible question you might have during a game, and especially during a combat, which is the most complicated part of any game. And I'm going to keep saying this over and over and over, and you guys are always going to hear me say this. Combat is the most complicated part of any gaming system. Why? Because if it was like any other skill, you'd just roll a dice and get it over with. But no. People want to do stuff like, I want to skewer this guy, run across the room, and then, throw my dagger and hit this guy in the head. And, as far as the skill check goes, it's kind of like, can I open this door? No. Roll a skill check. See if you can pick the lock. Okay. Pass, fail.
Yeah.
It's never that easy with combat. And combat systems are what break half the games anyway, because of how complicated they can become. So I'm going to say that 3.0, 3.5, and Pathfinder are terrible for this. Because, yes, they do break down combat to the point where you can figure out everything, but it's at the same time, it grinds the game to a halt as far as turns go. Especially if you have players who aren't very familiar with their stuff, or if you're playing at higher levels. And this is kind of a hand-in-hand sort of problem, too, by the way, out there, folks. A lot of these level-based games, the higher level your characters get, the more stuff they can do, and the more analysis paralysis starts setting in on your characters. Because now you have a ton of feats, you have all kinds of equipment, including magic items, plus probably spells, and you have all these different options to use every single round. And it's a 6-second round, so you're somehow supposed to be comfortably able to run all this crap in a timely manner on your turn. So what I find is that at higher levels, a lot of times, your players just kind of still break down into the simple, I hit it with my axe.
Yeah,
because
you're not rewarded for trying anything more outlandish or descriptive.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the special ability to do something, then you basically can't do it, even though you should be able to do it. And you get this disjunct between the world you've created in your head that you're immersed in and the rules, which aren't allowing you to do the thing that you should be able to do. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've used this example so many times. It's just like, if I want to, jump on a chandelier, swing across the room, and stab the guy on the other side of the room after swinging across, like, what's the best system to do that under? Well, if you use Pathfinder, it becomes a case of, okay, well, you only have 30 feet of movement per round. So jumping up onto the banister in order to jump out and grab the rope. Let's see, that's like a 10-foot move, but because there's a vertical element that's going to make it a 15-foot move, then you have to make a jump check. So that's your action economy won't support that. So you can only you can only jump on the chandelier and swing across, but you can't also stab the guy on the other side because you don't have enough action economy.
Yeah, it's sort of that ultimate downside of just frankly having so many options kind of built into the character that it sort of becomes a cage in which it becomes the only options you see for yourself. So that is sort of the downside of these bigger systems that keep throwing stuff at you. It's ironically becomes restricting.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I always felt that the older school, I guess, second edition storyteller games hit the sweet spot for me, because they were fairly loose with what you could do, so you could be fairly freely creative with it. It was simple, dice pool, roll against the difficulty, see how many successes you get, so you got a clue as to how good or bad you did at something. And you have the visual and haptic feedback of how many dice you're rolling and how many dice they're rolling. So it had a lot going for it that, for me, made it quite immersive. The system was there and was reasonably effective, but it got out of the way when you needed it to.
Oh. It says, if one can find players who are interested in the consequences of failure rather than winning, you don't need rules that impose objective failure conditions because players make interesting choices. Yeah.
Like choosing self-serving pirates as barons, things like that.
Savo! For people who are less naturally imaginative, do the action options, feats, or whatever, make them more likely to engage in descriptive actions? Not to my understanding. I mean, yes and no. It kind of depends on the feats. What I found especially with 3.0, when we first started learning how to use it, and 3.5, was I stopped building characters that I thought would necessarily be, well, I ran into two problems. One, I either ran into character ideas that were super duper optimized. They had all the best feats. They had all the best abilities. They level dipped into every class they needed to get the special abilities that made them super gods that could handle anything. Or I was literally building characters around a feat, because you'd have stuff like whirlwind attack which you could only get at higher levels on your warrior types. But you had to feat tree to get to it in the first place. So everything up to that point felt like a grind, because I'm like, all I want to do is get that next level so I can get closer to getting whirlwind attack. All I want to do is get closer to that next level. Can we play again? Because I need more XP. I need more XP. I need more XP. And then by the time you finally do get whirlwind attack, you use it in combat and you find out it's not that great. It's okay. Yeah. It works fine, but it turns out if you'd have been like the other guy across the table from you who hyper optimized his character to become a threshing death machine, you would have been way more combat effective.
Yeah. The thing about having these feats for things like whirlwind attack and so on is it tends to lock them off. So while another player might imaginatively say, can I do a really wild swing with my sword that would take in, this many enemies? They become cut off from doing it because it's now codified as a feat, which means anyone without the feat can't do it. Whereas I've always felt that the feats and special abilities like that should just be things that make it easier for you to pull off these special moves, but that anyone should be able to try them. I remember my first ever D&D game, playing my second character because the first one died at the front door, snuck up on a sleeping, I don't think it was a dragon, but something dragon-like, stabbed it in the eye. But because I wasn't playing a thief, I didn't get any backstab bonus or any bonus at all, even though this thing was completely helpless and only ended up doing like 2 damage and then getting eaten, which didn't seem right to me. That ruined my immersion. For games that encourage people to be really imaginative and forthright with what they're doing, I don't think anything beats Feng Shui, because you get bonuses for being descriptive and over the top and ridiculous, because it's a Hong Kong action sort of game. So that really gets even reluctant players will become descriptive to chase a bonus.
But something to consider too is the fact that until 3rd edition, we never considered whirlwind attacks or cleave or anything like that, because they didn't exist on the books. So characters, I should say players, never really thought of using them. AD&D is good, but it is, for a warrior anyway, for a fighter type, a pretty simplistic game of, I hit you with my axe.
Yeah.
And that was what was so cool about 3.0 and 3.5, is even though Monty Cook, hated all the classes except for mages, and Monty Cook can lick my ass, but it gave fighting classes so many more options than was previously available, because now you had, 2 sword fighting, 2 weapon fighting. You had all kinds of stuff like, shield and sword fighting. You had 2 shield fighting. You had cleave. You had, the one I used famously, and it used to piss the GM off so much when I found it, was step up. And that pissed him off to no end, because every time he'd have an enemy spellcaster, my character would run up and base him immediately. It didn't matter if he could attack him. My character would always run up and stand next to the enemy mage. And why would I do this? Because I knew the AOO rules. And I knew the AOO rules so well. And what Step Up lets you do is, if an opponent takes a 5-foot step away from you, you immediately take a 5-foot step closer to him. Why that was important is because every time a spellcaster would try to cast his spells, if he was standing next to another character that was threatening him with an AOO, they immediately got an AOO, an attack of opportunity. So basically, I was ensuring that an enemy spellcaster could never get his spells off without me hitting him and possibly screwing up his spell. And yeah, that used to piss the GM off to no end. I mean, he tried like hell to get that rule taken down. I'm just kind of like, it's in the basic book. It's right there. It's like, they obviously intended for you to use this way as a counter. And that led to another series of problems with 3.0, 3.5, and Pathfinder, is the fact that you ended up with a counter versus counter versus counter versus counter system, where the GM is like building characters to actively counter your character's abilities because, you know, they know what you can do.
So, what games do you find it easiest to improv off the back of? And not so much through experience, because that kind of biases the sample, but from the way they're designed.
For me, the baseline easiest is probably Scarlet Heroes. And that is because since it was originally designed for solo play or for one-on-one play, Crawford has kind of taken into account that your character might not have the skills available to do what they need to be able to do in a given moment. So he's got a mechanic built into it where you basically can take damage to do what you need to do. But also there's nothing inhibiting the things that you want to do. Nobody has ever, played Scarlet Heroes with me and said, I want to cleave and hit these several characters all at once. But if they wanted to, there's a mechanic in place that, I would just tell them, like, okay, roll your heroic feat, or roll your heroic thing and, take some damage, and I'll let you hit all these guys at once. Of course, it also had the, what was the mechanic that we liked so much?
Oh, the passive damage?
Yeah, the passive damage, the dice. That was sweet. I love that. So yeah, I would say Scarlet Heroes is probably the easiest immersive and reactionary game that you could run, and you could run it for a large group. The problem with that becomes a case of, that it is so open, it really does require a lot of GM adjudication. It requires a lot of GM attention, because the GM is constantly being called into question for what are they going to do? What are you going to do? What can you do? But in my opinion, it lets you do the most. I would have said Fabula Ultima, because I really like Fabula Ultima. I really like the way it plays. But here's the problem I'm seeing, and I know Caster's not gonna. I can hear Caster frowning over the microphone. I really can. We have only played Fabula Ultima at the lowest levels.
Yep.
So what happens if we're like 50 or 60 games into Fabula Ultima and you have, like, I don't know, level 15 characters. Now you have a ton of abilities on your character. Which one do you choose in any given moment?
I don't know that it does scale up in terms of options that quickly. So presumably over the intervening time that you do get extra powers. And I think many of them do come in multiple levels, so you're just getting stronger at some of them. I think you'd get used to it because they're slowly introduced.
Right, and yeah, at most we're talking what, maybe 3 to 4 abilities per class. So you're not exactly scaling like you would with like 5th edition D&D or Pathfinder, where you have done tons and tons of options over the course of like 30, 40, 50 levels.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side of things, is Dragonbane. I like Dragonbane. Is it immersive and reactionary? Kind of hard to say. I don't know. I don't think so. Mostly because there's not much of a sense of progression with the characters. They don't really seem to grow a whole lot between adventures. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Grim, you probably have more experience with it than I do. But
I haven't played it long enough to get to higher levels. I mean, that's a problem with a lot of games and playtesting games. It's like, I think D&D, regardless of edition, kind of stops getting better from 6th level. Pretty much, that's in an ideal world. That's where you cap out. But I don't like class/level systems anyway.
And esoteric, yeah. I really, whenever I thought about the title for this for Reactionary, I thought, oh man, we really should have had Mr. Max Bovan on here, because yeah, that's his whole thing is reactionary gaming, and he is not a fan of D20 systems. He does not like them. I forget what he is a fan of, but yeah, he doesn't use D20 systems. Now, other stuff like, I don't know, hero system, GURPS, and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to say that stuff probably breaks down into minutia a little bit too much again, to the point where you end up with the same problem with really long, extended turns because players have analysis paralysis trying to figure out all the stuff that they can do. Although, on its head, it kind of plays pretty good. I mean, it's like, to me, it seems like most games play fine at a base level. Like level 1, basically.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. Any game at like level 1 is going to be immersive and reactionary, but it's when you start adding more and more complications in for long-term games, that's when the games start getting more complex, and when the immersion and the reactions break down. Special is better GURPS, and that was made in a hurry. Well, is it though? Because you can't really it's like apples and oranges. Special is the Fallout system, and Fallout is largely computerized. So all of your stuff is going to be, handled by the computer. So there's a lot of minutia that's going on behind the scenes, and it is turn-based, the original one.
Yeah, but it was originally GURPS, which is the joke, I think.
So how many bookshelves have you had installed in the house for GURPS?
Oh man, we played GURPS extensively back in the early 90s. So yeah, I had a lot of GURPS books.
Great, all mine were just not for playing GURPS.
Well, it's like that's the problem though. You'd end up buying like a GURPS book just to get like one little special ability out of a book that you liked. You know, it didn't matter if it necessarily fit the setting or not. It's like, oh look, GURPS car mechanic has this one particular skill that I really, really want, but I don't have it in my base books or any other books, so I've got to buy GURPS car mechanic in order to buy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Sava said something interesting earlier about roll first and then describe what happens rather than describing what you're trying to do, which is something I've been fiddling about in little side projects and things for a while. Mm-hmm. So, okay, I did really well on that attack. I'll use it to stab through that slit in their helmet and get them in the face. You know,
yeah.
So would it be better
just nick them? Sorry, go on.
Would it be better with that in mind? Would it be better to have sort of a preset, levels of success that the players would know about to be able to rather quickly decide like how well they succeed to be able to describe that? Or is that something you think would be better for the GM to sort of inform them of?
Well, that's what Savo was talking about. That's what she's talking about.
Yes, and I was talking about what Grim was.
Yeah, I think you could do it either way. So, like, your character could be constructed so that they find certain types of move easier, so they need less successes. So you could do it that way. So the player goes, "Oh, I rolled 3 successes. I'll put 2 into damage and 1 to hit the specific location that I want to, or whatever it is." But you can equally do it the other way around. The degree of success can inform the games master to tell you, how good of an attack you did. So it can help from either end with description, depending how you want to go through it.
This just sounds like we're just we're rebuilding the Genesis or FFG narrative system.
Kind of.
I don't get that much Fantasy Flight games, so.
So with their one, correct me if I'm wrong, Caster, but you roll the dice and then the varying symbols influence what actually happens. So different aspects of whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether there's complications or setbacks or whatever. That's more deterministic than I'm talking about, but
right.
You can
so with the, and it's the same across like Genesis and the Star Wars system that I'm most familiar with, but the idea is, it's the dice have all these funny symbols on them, and they will have symbols that negate each other: success and failure, advantage and setback, triumph and despair. And the idea is you get all your dice you roll, and you sit down and you kind of you figure out what negates what, and then you can use the leftover pool to determine what happens. So you could fail, but you still get some advantage out of your action, or you can succeed, but you have enough setback, or you can succeed and have some extra narrative advantage. So maybe you're trying to shoot at a bad guy, and you fail to hit them, but you've got enough advantage there that you can narratively decide, I shot the fire extinguisher next to him, creating a smoke cloud. So we have some extra, difficulty to be seen, so we can, be safe.
Cover.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, and I'm going to say this too. Kit here says, roll the dice, or roll then describe is interesting because in principle it can apply to any system, and yet it so rarely is because it avoids the cart before the horse of describing an action that fails. And okay, I'm going to speak up on this because this is something I know about pretty intrinsically. Here lately, for the last few years, I've been playing with some friends online on a game where, combat is conducted that way. It's like we have to put our post in where it's like, it's like, okay, my character, ramps his fist back and grabs the other guy by the throat, prepares to punch his face in, and then you roll your dice, and your dice are shit. So you fail miserably. So then it becomes on the other guy, his reaction to that and how he's going to counter to it. You know, and usually, you know, if your opponent's pretty gracious, you know, they don't make you look too bad. But but I always thought, yeah, it would be much better to go ahead and roll your dice and get those out of the way and then do your post. You know, I was like, okay, well, you know, I have to hit an AC 15, so it's like I roll my dice, I got a 20, bam. You know, with a stupendous, you know, back curling of the fist, you know, I utter a great ki and you know, scream out loud and then punch the man right in his throat, and you know. But we don't do that. You know? It just
yeah.
We do it the other way.
That's why I've been experimenting with it, because I think it is a better way to do it. It just goes against everyone's instincts, I think.
Yeah. And the only time I ever see it come into play is more often than not, a GM will say, okay, describe how you wish to kill this beast or finish this creature. You know,
so how do you want to do this?
Yeah. How do you want to describe this blow? Yeah. As you kill this character.
And you know, maybe you're onto something there with that, Grim, to try to encourage that more.
Yeah, I'll keep tinkering with it. It will turn up in one of my games at some point. I just don't know when.
The player rolls in the round, say they get a 13, and they have 13 points in effects that they either spend on drama or forfeit. You know,
say 5 points means a successful attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. That has merit. I could see some ideas coming off of that.
Yeah.
Kit says he likes FFG's narrative system, but it needs players who are prepared to step up and explain the results. Without that, it's exhausting for a GM who has to fill in the gaps.
And yeah, there is something to that as well, because I've played with players who just they didn't seem to quite get it, but they also hadn't read through all the books like I had. So there's that challenge of trying to introduce it to people.
Yeah, that's a problem I run into in a lot of, not necessarily FFG, but other narrative systems. Like, it's one of my many, many issues with Apocalypse World, is the way the system is geared. You're constantly having to come up with yes and no but. And so, you know, if you've got 4, 5, 6 players, you're having to improvise for all of them and yourself constantly with little modifiers and changes and so on. And so as a games master, it's really exhausting. Even if you're really good, I think it gets to a point of being exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, describe then roll means reframing actions as intentions and aims, and this is not generally how we've been trained. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I'm used to from, like I said, playing privately with other people. Is the description and then the roll, but it would actually make more sense to do the description after the roll.
Yeah.
It does seem to be an issue of what denominator one is catering to. Well, there is that also, yeah. Again, it's like, you may have people who really are simulationists, and that is their form of immersion, is getting that deep into the nitty-gritty of all the minutia, and maybe they like having, 2-hour combats. I mean, honestly, that's the cool thing about gaming, is if there is a style of game that you like, or a particular way that you like gaming, there's probably a system out there that exists that caters to it. It's just a matter of finding it and finding somebody who will run it, and then getting a group together that will play it for more than one session.
I told you that story about the Traveller players who are all engineers and scientists, and they enjoyed and got immersed calculating orbits using proper physics and everything. So,
no, you didn't.
I'm sure I have mentioned it somewhere before, but yeah, for them that was fun. So.
That must have been a really different game.
Yeah, I only observed. I didn't play. I couldn't keep up with that stuff.
Well, I did have an actual Pathfinder game once that the players really, really, really enjoyed, because just by sheer accident of the way the dice came down. They did really, really well on a perform roll in a tavern and decided they should start a band. So they became a traveling bardic troupe. Just, playing at different places. And I would have all kinds of, bardic mishaps happen. Like, oh, somebody stole your instruments or...
Yeah.
But they enjoyed that run. They really enjoyed it until one of the players killed it by basically stopping all random encounters through a boon. Despite the fact that everybody else in the party begged him not to. But, it's like, okay, well, you killed the game. What if one gets a bonus because they risk describing first and potentially looking foolish versus the more certain results by describing after? Savo, you're actually coming up with some really interesting mechanical ideas. That would be kind of neat. I would almost want to see some kind of a swingy system with that. Like yeah, okay, you describe all of your attacks and stuff, but if you fudge it up and you don't manage to hit, then you get like some kind of a bonus on the next round, based on how well you did or how poorly you did. And this is a bonus that can keep building up until you eventually hit and get that super duper awesome hit.
One thing pre-described actions failing is good for is it, as a games master, it really gives you good ideas on how they could have fumbled. So, yeah, if they say, I lunge across the room and drive my rapier into his heart. Okay, you lunged across the room, missed, and it stabbed into a beam of the tavern, and now your sword's stuck. Things like that. It can give you clues as to how they can fuck up.
Mm-hmm. Because of the disjunct between aims and actual results. Yeah, that's always true. I don't know. This is maybe something we should probably experiment with on some of our games and see how it works out. Yeah, because it sounds like it would be fun. I don't know, but I think maybe some kind of a mechanic in place where, yeah, it does reward you for failing. By just giving you more and more bonuses to build up, and it also kind of helps. Okay, I mean, all right. How many times have you guys had a night where you couldn't hit a fucking thing? I'm serious. I had nights that were miserable. We would get into 3 or 4 combats, and my dice were like chunking 4, 3, 5, 5, 6, 3, 4. I mean, I couldn't roll above a 10 on anything.
So the current system from Cobalt Press for their Tales of the Valiant,
here we go again,
does have a luck mechanic in place to where if you fail rolls, you get a point of luck, and you can bank those up and spend those in to either add a point to a dice roll, or to spend like 3 of them and you can re-roll a dice.
Yeah. That actually sounds like a workable system. And Grim, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's Dragon Dragon Bane or what system it is. But isn't there a system where if you fumble, you get some kind of a bonus, or you get some kind of a Benny point?
It might have been Fabula Ultima as well. I know it's in Ryutama, which we'll be playing Sunday if I get enough sleep. And it may have been Dragon Bane. Yeah, there's various games that do give you something as a compensation for botching, like experience points or a chance to roll to advance your skill. I think that's what it was for Dragon Bane. Because it's basically RuneQuest. Yeah.
See, I really like that idea as well, because it becomes a case of, okay, well, failure isn't... It takes the edge off of failing. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe we need more... My thing is, okay, in all games, tabletop gaming, role-playing gaming, I like risk versus reward. You know, I like, if somebody gives me a mechanic where it's kind of like, okay, you can spend all your points to do this, but if you do this, the drawbacks will be massive. Because I'm one of those guys who will go like, okay, I'm going to spend all my points to do this one thing. And if I blow it, so be it. That's just me. But that's part of my immersion and reaction. And I guess I would be remiss in not mentioning my favorite immersive and reaction game, Torg. And why do I keep coming back to Torg? Well, because one, it's a simple system. Two, because it lets you do anything. It's got skills built in. It's got all kinds of special abilities built in. It's got all kinds of interesting classes, characters, and races, and everything else already built in. Everything works off of a D20 mechanic. It has a system in place that can let you alter your dice or add dice. So even if you are failing a roll, Torg, like let's say I have to roll above a certain number in Torg in order to hit, I can always burn a possibility dice to throw an additional dice and add that on top of it to see if I succeed by literally bending reality. And then, of course, it also has the immersion level of keeping other players interested because they're sitting there with their cards waiting to affect how a fight falls. I mean, even if it's not their turn, Caster could be sitting there with his with his thwart card, where if the opponent hits me with a crit, he can play haha no, he is thwarted, and suddenly the opponent misses or something else happens. That to me is like the peak of reactionary gaming, because now you've got everybody is interested, everybody's always on waiting to see what everybody else is going to be doing and reacting to it quickly. The GM is still part of the action. And it's still immersive because everybody's involved. So I don't know. I hate to keep going back to Torg, guys, but I think Torg got it perfect the first time. I don't know why it never caught on.
It did pretty well for a while.
Yeah, for a while. I don't know. I mean, it is back, but it doesn't feel the same.
Back in POG form.
Well, they do have POGs now, actually, or little poker chips, actually. I don't know. Anyway, did we actually solve any problems today? Did we actually fix anything? Did we actually figure out anything? What games are good for this? I mean, obviously Torg would be my top favorite. Followed probably by Scarlet Heroes. What about you guys?
I mean, I feel like we did come up with a couple of ideas.
Okay.
Well, we came up with some interesting design ideas.
We did.
I still say Storyteller for me is
okay.
Up there.
Okay.
It's one of the more immersive and reactive systems. So.
Okay. So Storyteller, Caster?
I still kind of lean towards that narrative dice with FFG, and I know there's the frustration of trying to find the funny dice, but if it seems like Fantasy Flight has decided to actually get that sort of fixed up, and they're starting to be available again.
Now I haven't seen the silhouette system. I don't think. Have we used it, Grim?
No, we haven't used it yet. We will be playing Heavy Gear at some point.
Okay.
But that's the new version of the system, which is substantially different. So what Heavy Gear is really good at isn't necessarily immersion, but it scales really well. So you can play it at a sort of skirmish or war game level. You can play with giant vehicles, small vehicles down at the personal level. It can encompass a whole lot really easily, which is why I think it's so successful for military gaming.
Can I play Jeremy Clarkston?
Yes. But you have to drive a combine harvester now.
Okay. So when we play heavy gear, Savo, you got to play with us. You got to play with us.
Or any other time. I guess for anybody, we've got space.
Yeah, we do have space. We have plenty of player space. So yeah, if you want to play with us on Sundays, just let us know on X. Just my DMs are open. Just peek in there and say, hey, can I play? And we'll let you. But yes, you have to play Silhouette with us when we replay that. Okay, because it would be funny. Scheduling is murder, but you will try. Okay, that's all we ask. Jeremy Clarkson used a hoe. It's super effective.
We did have a Space Marine use a plow as a sword in a game once.
I could see that. The whole plow.
Yeah.
Because he's a Space Marine, yeah, he could do that.
Space Marine, yeah. And that was during his trials to become a full Space Marine. And then he took the plow with him when he went back to the chapter. And the Tech Marines made it into a power blade for him.
Power plow.
Yes, a plower blade.
Power blade. All right. Okay, so tonight, Castor and I will be on again for Tuesday with Geeks. Maybe we get Grim. I don't know. Maybe, but
Mrs. Grimm has a visitor for the rest of the week, so I don't know.
Okay,
I'll be
well,
around. We shall see.
Okay,
all
right.
We'll roll the dice on it.
Roll the dice on it. Yeah. I would like to know where I can acquire a copy of Ryu Tama, so I can look up the rules before we play.
It's on drive-through.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't know where you can still get hard copies. I got mine from Leisure Games, but
yeah. Okay. Good enough. All right, everybody out there in YouTube land. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you got some new ideas, some new tips, and some new new things to associate with. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys out there are just as frustrated as we were with some of these things. But anyway.
Here's nope.
What?
There's a link for your T-shirt.
Okay, thanks. All right. But until then, we will see you tonight. Take care, everybody, and have a great weekend, Geek.
Look, the Dungeons and Dragons ride!